Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Jorgy'S Stripping the Dipping podcast. I'm your unusual co-host, F1 Blag, and today we have a fantastic guest. We're going to talk all about socioeconomic mobility in motorsport. So, without further ado, Ryan Yates, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, thank you. I'm off work at the moment, so I'm just sort of relaxing, having my sort of couple of weeks off. So tell us, Ryan, if you're introducing yourself to someone who doesn't know you, how do you do that? Who is Ryan Yates?
Who is Ryan Yates? I guess I'll start from where I grew up. So I grew up in Rochdale in the northwest of England. It's about 8 miles northeast of Manchester. Spent the first 18 years of my life there. Had a pretty normal upbringing, I would say, as normal as it goes. I definitely, when I was a youngster, played with a lot of different sort of STEM toys. I remember my first sort of Scalextric set. I grew up watching Top Gear and things like that, so my love of cars really stemmed from that. I also, as well, when I was a youngster, I'd often go around to my grandma's house, and the next door neighbor had a massive train set there, something that really honestly belonged in the museum. So I was a bit of a nerd and a geek when I was younger, for sure. But I don't think you ever really lose that as you get older. And honestly, that's a little bit of what's carried through into the startup that I run now. And I guess what we're probably going to talk a little bit more about today.
No, brilliant. And so STEM is going to come up a bit, and that's, I think, science, technology, engineering, and maths. Is that right?
Yes. In fact, at Idaci Motorsport, we use STEAM more regularly, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths.
Okay.
Which often gets the running joke, oh, you might as well just say all industries, but it's not quite all of them, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the A for arts, like these guys have wheedled their way back into. No, I'm joking. I'm a maths graduate, so I'm kind of part of the STEM family, I suppose. Yeah, that's well. Go on.
I'm an engineering graduate, so you know.
Yeah, we would have glanced at each other from across the kind of university campus if I wasn't ridiculously old. So, speaking of sort of age, tell us about like your first motorsport memory. What's the first thing you can picture when you think about motorsport as a child?
First thing, I think it would have to be. I watched my first Formula One race when I think it was definitely around the 2007 season. Or probably my earliest memory, around the time when Hamilton was coming into the sport. Yeah, that's my very sort of earliest memories, I would say, for sure.
I mean, those cars were pretty good looking as well, so a good time for your eyes to be transfixed on the sport. Yeah. Did you have any? Go on. Go on. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, those cars were pretty magnificent, and to be honest, I've been a lifelong McLaren fan ever since I saw the silver, the chrome and red McLaren all the way back then. I kind of wish it was that old livery now, to be honest. Not to say I don't like the papaya, but yeah, it's not quite the same.
It is interesting because for different people, McLaren have different liveries. So clearly, we've had papaya for a few years. We had the kind of black, I guess, for like an extremely unsuccessful period with the kind of Honda engine. And then, like the kind of chrome and red, sponsors permitting, I suppose, with there. For me, I guess I would associate McLaren with the red and white Marlboro livery. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's like a question to people listening. Reply to this podcast. What is your sort of McLaren livery that you remember or that you associate most of the team? So Ryan, did you have any drivers that you particularly followed back then?
I mean, I always thought Raikkonen was pretty cool. I'll never forget when, this is probably going back further than when I first watched Formula One, but I do remember my dad showing me a clip of when Raikkonen, I think he either broke down or had a crash at Monaco, and then he, instead of going back to the pit wall, he decided that he would go to his yacht and just crack open a nice drink while the rest of the race was continuing. I think I became a little bit of a fan of his after that. I thought that was quite funny and quite cool. But yeah, I think Currently, my favorite Formula One driver is Lando Norris. I love what he's done to sort of bring young people into the sport, especially during the pandemic, with a lot of the work he did around esports, and sort of connecting with his audience that way. And just the level of social media engagement he got with that was pretty amazing to kind of see. Between those, sort of the gap of when I saw that Raikkonen clip and Lando, which is obviously quite recent. Yeah, probably my favorite driver was Lewis Hamilton, in all honesty. Not just because of his success, but his story and where he came from. You know, a lot of people will assume he obviously comes from karts and things like that, but you know, it really started for him with a small remote control car that his dad bought him, and then realized that he had amazing hand-eye coordination, and thought, well, I wonder how this transfers into a real car. And it transferred really, really well. So yeah, I thought that was pretty inspiring, to be honest.
Yeah, that's like perhaps the best hunch in sporting history. Like, I wonder how this guy's going to do behind the wheel. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we hear more about your startup, let's just talk a little bit about the latest F1 news. So we're at the start, as we record this, of the summer. So we just had the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa. I'm vaguely assuming the next race is going to be in the Netherlands. I could be wrong about that. But it's all that sort of Europe flavor. But there's a good few weeks where the factories are told to close down. We've heard, I think, from some quote unquote sources that from 2026 there'll be similar rules for engines that mean that if one engine supplier is more than 3% down on power, then essentially they have that opportunity to do more testing and development to catch up. Is that something you've heard this week?
Yeah, I have. It feels like it's been going around the rumor mill a little while, and yeah, I mean, in terms of my thoughts on it, I think it's interesting when you look at sort of motorsports and categories in general. I feel like the ones that do best are the ones that really kind of know what they are, and I think Formula One, for a period before I would say the sort of American sort of takeover that happened a few years ago. I'm not quite sure it knew where it wanted to go. It was very heavily focused on the technology and implementing that, and there was a point where it almost felt like a big sort of technology demonstration in a way, and the fans kind of almost took a bit of a back seat, if that makes sense. But now it feels like the direction is very much for how do we make this sport as entertaining as possible, and how do we keep the racing as close as possible? Because I think they've looked sort of across the pond at NASCAR and IndyCar and thought fans really do engage with that kind of motorsport an awful lot, and especially the younger audiences that have started to come through. That as a thing of importance is sort of really heavily weighted in the minds of those who run Formula One, I think, now. So the technology is important. The engineer in me is slightly sad to see more of the simplification of the power units, but then the motorsport fan in me is very glad that actually the less technical and almost sometimes the less quick the cars are, the more closer the racing is. So I think, all in all, I think it will be a positive thing. And also the fact that the cars are hopefully going to get lighter from 2026 as well. I think that was my one gripe with the new regulations personally, is that the cars didn't look like there was as chuckable, if you like, and that kind of ruined the racing a little bit at times.
Yeah, that's a huge shout. I mean, from let's say mid-90s, the cars were barely over 500 kilos, and now they're up nearly 800. So, percentage-wise, that's a 60% growth. If we all put on 60% weight, we'd notice it significantly. We'll probably have to go to the doctor. So yeah. So I mean, absolutely, the motorsport fan in me wants closer racing. It's interesting because I've not really thought that the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, and I suppose what we're going to call them, we can't call them Honda, maybe we're going to call them Red Bull power units for the time being, that they've all been vaguely in the same ballpark, but maybe Renault have been a bit adrift. Perhaps that's where the motivation's coming from, to make sure that fourth supplier doesn't just say, I'm out of here. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think if you're a new powertrain supplier looking to come in, so we know Ford are entering the picture quite soon, maybe there's been some external pressure from those looking to come into the sport to say, well, if we're going to make a power unit, we'd like to hit the ground running. So could you put something in place that almost levels the playing field so we really know what we're working towards?
Yeah, that's a huge shout, because if you look at the last major supplier that came in, it was Honda. We just already, like within the first 5 minutes of the podcast, sort of slightly laughed
Yeah,
about how
yeah,
sad or challenging, their first few years were, and the unforgettable Alonso quote GP2 engine. So yeah, I suppose from a kind of marketing or brand perspective, if you're Ford, or I don't know, I don't think Audi are going to make their own engines. Who knows? Maybe they will. But if you Cadillac as well, if Andretti get their wish and come into the sport, you're not going to want to turn up and be sort of dramatically off the pace. But there we are.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money to invest, isn't it? I mean, we've already seen sort of Porsche half enter the picture, and now they're not. And I couldn't quite figure out why. It seemed like there was lots of different reasons as to why that didn't happen, and lots of people in the media who had their own opinions, and I'm sure some of them were correct, and they've got way more insider knowledge than me. But yeah, I couldn't help but wonder whether, looking at the other categories that Porsche are in, which do have more of a sort of level playing field on a technical perspective, whether that played a little bit of a part in it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Porsche, because if I'm not mistaken, like they had actually had some quite detailed conversations with Red Bull, and so it seemed like that was a route they were going to go down. And we know Red Bull are going to bring Ford into the picture now, and Porsche sort of pulled out quite publicly. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
2026, engine equalization. We've got the cost cap. We've got the kind of inverted sort of aero testing rules. So fingers crossed it brings the field together. I don't know. Who knows?
Fingers crossed. Yeah, I just want to see Norris get his first win. He's coming closer, so if any technical assistance can help him achieve that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly, right. Well, to be honest, right, and slightly going off topic, my favorite series at the moment is IndyCar, and I used to watch it like ages and ages ago when they picked up a few former F1 drivers. So I thought, oh, I know that name, I'll watch it, and it was quite entertaining then. But for whatever reason, I switched off, and now, like, obviously, there's a fantastic talent, Alex Palou, who's running away with a title, but genuinely, like the wheel-to-wheel action, the cars are basically one of two engines, and the aero is spec. So yeah, the racing is much closer. Perhaps Formula One is looking at that, not necessarily to have a spec series, but to have that competitiveness, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny you mentioned IndyCar as well, because I equally more recently I've started to watch it a bit more than I normally used to. I think I'm just trying to think. Yeah, it's probably around the last couple of years, especially when I saw McLaren putting some of their Indy drivers in test drives in Formula One. I thought, oh, who's this guy? And then started following Pato O'Ward and those sorts of drivers, and learning they actually had, they were in some of the F1 development academies earlier in their career, and then obviously moved to Indy. So yeah, from there I started to watch Indy more, and it does have an awful lot of appeal in terms of the wheel-to-wheel action, for sure. It's definitely hooked me.
Absolutely, and I'm sort of extremely saddened that you'd mentioned Pato O'Ward, because that is Den's, my co-host's favourite IndyCar driver. So fair play. I'll have to accept that he is a great talent and he's growing. But do you know what? Talking about IndyCar, it's actually a great way to segue into social mobility and motorsport, and to hear more about your startup, because what we're seeing at the moment in IndyCar is a lot of drivers who simply cannot afford to continue to climb the ladder in sort of, I guess, what has been traditionally called European motorsport, but perhaps FIA sanctioned motorsport, and they have to find another way. And maybe your startup is actually much further down the pipeline in terms of getting people into motorsport at a younger age. Tell us a bit about your startup. Is it called, I don't know, is it Idaci, or is it pronounced altogether as one word? What is it called?
That's the question I get asked the most. It's called Idaci Motorsport. So I'll tell you what it stands for as well. So it stands for inclusivity, diversity, adaptability, creativity, and integrity. And the idea behind it is we wanted a company name that embodied what we thought were the most important values within our small team that we are, within the careers that we've had so far, and what we felt was most important to a young person's career as they move through STEAM if we want to call it that, and specifically motorsport too. And the values that I think, the likes of regulators like Motorsport UK really want to champion as well within racing, and keeping things not just competitive and fair, but also inclusive and diverse as well. So that's kind of where the name originated from. But yeah, the startup itself, really how you view the startup is sort of depends on who you are. So if you're a young person, you will get to know us hopefully quite well as a STEM club provider. So essentially our STEM clubs will run sort of learning and 3 race championships within the sort of science, technology, engineering, arts and maths field, if you like. So the 3 championships themselves are slot car racing, or scale electrics, as most of the listeners will probably know it as, remote control car racing, and karting. And the idea is that we can provide a pathway for someone as young as the age of 8, and we are trying to work on something that will lower that to 6, all the way through their education experience, all the way up to 18. Because what we found is when we looked at lots of motorsport educational competitions and what exists in the market currently, is you do one of these competitions. I won't name any because I think lots of them are great, and I've even taken part in some myself. But you take part in the competition, you maybe do it for 1 year, maybe 2, and then it's not really clear what you're supposed to do next, and what that next step is for you. So what we wanted to do is create these sort of STEM clubs where it's very clear, as you move up through your academic experience, you can move up through our different championships. So the age categories that they fall in, for 8 to 11-year-olds, so the sort of upper primary school age in the UK, that's where you would take part in our slot car championship, where you'll be tasked with designing and 3D printing your own bodywork for a small model car, and then you'll get to race it in various different race formats on a scale electric set within your classroom, and then in bigger sort of regional, and then hopefully, if you're good enough, national competitions. The remote control car championship is more of a full sort of design, build, test and race experience, and that covers age ranges from sort of 11 to 16, sort of covering the high school ages really. The idea is that it's integrated into the curriculum for design and technology that a student might learn across those different age ranges. So it's not something additional we put on schools and young people to do. It's very much enhancing what's already there, which we thought was a really important thing to focus on, because a lot of people kind of bash the education system and say, oh, it doesn't make people work ready and things like that. But we actually think there's an awful lot there to make young people work ready. It's just, it doesn't get exploited enough. So really our programs are designed to exploit the maximum potential of existing qualifications and projects and so on. And then the final championship, which is our sort of 16 to 18 year category, so sort of college age in the UK, that's focused on the design, build, test and race of a 4-stroke go-kart. So essentially, if I was to pick, to sort of summarize those competitions, they are combining the accessibility that you might find in taking part in something like Green Power, the Green Power Challenge, I should say, but mixed with the technical and professional development that you would get from something like a university level competition like Formula Student. And then on top of that, because it's karting and, actual, wheel-to-wheel racing in all of the forms, you get that extra competitive element thrown in as well. So that's the kind of like STEM clubs part, and how you would view as if you're a young person. If you're, say, a parent or someone as part of the sort of general public, you will hopefully come to know us in the future as more of a sports, spectator sports and entertainment business. So the idea is that what we want to do is take our race championships and really create a immersive race experience for young people and their families at an affordable price as well, and essentially bringing the racing away from standard racetracks that we see and into sort of cities and arena style racing where everything is sort of done to scale. So essentially, what we're essentially really looking to do is showcase young people's talents from our STEM clubs, the best racers in all of those different race championships, and really put them out there. Almost in a similar style and way, if I was to liken it to something a bit like what Robot Wars used to do when it was on the BBC. You didn't have to have an awful lot of equipment and things to take part when it, in its original form anyway. It kind of grew and grew and went down a different direction. But it combined entertainment for people who were watching, but also a significant STEM challenge for those who were actually taking part. And overall, as an overall package, ultimately, it was just fun. And that's what we really want to get across, and us combined with some of the sponsors and partners that we're working with at the moment, to really just create a fun and showcase a fun kind of STEM motorsport experience for young people and their families, no matter what their background is and what their academic capability is. There is something for them, essentially.
Gosh, you took it right out of the words out of my mouth. Robot Wars. I was just thinking when you said, getting young people doing engineering on one hand, and on the other, it's entertainment. Like, yeah, absolutely, and that was huge. I think in the UK, in the US, sort of, it was a huge moment, maybe 20, 25 years ago. So, if I presume you're based in the UK. So, like, if you're
Yeah.
a parent in the UK, or perhaps even a child listening, how does one get involved? Like, presumably you've got to start somewhere and build up. Like, how many schools are you aiming to reach over time?
Yeah, so we will be releasing our STEM clubs from October this year, so just after the start of the academic year. As you can register your interest for our slot car championship now on our website. But what we're essentially doing is building up the other championships ready for that STEM club launch, if you like. So those aren't fully ready yet in terms of being able to sign up and register an interest and things like that. But essentially, it can happen in two ways. You can either get involved by essentially your school, coming to us through STEM Learning, who we're working with, and essentially signing up students for the STEM club, which may either be like an after-school club outside of normal lessons, or it might be something that teachers decide, actually, we can integrate this into our normal design and technology lessons, and it just forms a normal part of the curriculum, with the added benefit of it's a bit fun, and we can also do some racing and break the lessons up a little bit, which I'm sure the students would appreciate. And then the other way is, essentially, if you're a parent, you can go on our website, and as and when we've released the STEM clubs, we'll also open up the entry into our different championships, the remote control car racing and karting and slot car racing, and sign up directly through us, and then we'll provide all the information essentially for their young ones, or even themselves if they were interested, to get involved in the STEM clubs, and take part that way.
So it's inclusivity, diversity, adaptability, creativity. Like, if those aren't watchwords to live by, I don't know what they are. So, good luck. We're sort of in your corner, and definitely keen to see how this progresses. I guess my question, if we sort of take it back to you as a child, like, you talked a bit about, like, you were playing on those slot cars, Scalextrics, other models are available at your nan's house. Like, thinking about your first memories, like, and you getting into engineering, what are you doing to kind of reach, to rekindle that magic, that enticement, and getting people from different backgrounds, gender diversity, socioeconomic diversity, ethnic diversity? What are you doing in order to reach those people?
Yeah, so a lot of this is really sort of, I guess to start with, so me, I guess what we want to do is create the feelings that I had as a youngster, in terms of like the amount of how would I put this? I used to, I guess, daydream a lot when I was a youngster, when I was playing with those toys, about, and I'm sure we all did it, maybe we had a carpet that had sort of like road markings on it and things like that, and make our own little race tracks and stuff. And you always imagine that the toys are much bigger and greater than they are, and that's kind of what we want to do, is sort of really elevate those toys, if you want to call them that, to their maximum potential. If I was to liken it to anything, there was a great TV show years and years ago from one of my favorite presenters called James May's Toy Stories. And yeah, that was quite a bit of an inspiration when I saw what he did with slot cars and some of the toys that I used to play with, including things like toy trains and so on. So that's one element of it. We want to sort of grab audiences into motorsport who maybe wouldn't normally pick it up just from something really, really loud and screaming V8 engine or whatever coming through the TV, and maybe that's not their kind of thing. But something that's just sort of fun and a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Attainable, if you like. So that's one element of it. The second element of it with regards to the diversity and inclusion piece is really how we shape the STEM clubs. So, and also our price points as well, realistically. We've been very careful with the fees that we would request of schools to take part in our championships. And we've been working very hard with sponsors and partners to really focus on driving the price down as much as we can for the end user, for those to take part. So that's kind of the sort of economic mobility piece. And then, yeah, essentially the structure and things that we're putting in place with partners and internally for our STEM clubs, and tapping into the wider knowledge that exists within STEM Learning, which is the government organisation which manages pretty much every STEM ambassador in the UK. And tapping into that wide array of knowledge of how we target, say, groups like those with special educational needs, those who would really, really struggle to get into motorsport just because of the current nature of what it takes to be able to drive and things like that. So, you know, these entry points that we've put forward with our toys, if you want to call them those, I kind of hate calling them that, but it is what they are. And with our championships, if you like, they are as accessible as they possibly can be, in the sense that they are no different to what would be what normal activities you would find in a classroom. And that's been our biggest sort of focus, really, with regards to making this as inclusive as we possibly can. And our race formats as well are really focused on just being fun as more than anything, and almost at some points a little bit silly, but it takes away some of the stress that you might feel if you're entering into motorsport initially. As your first time into the sport, you know, it might just all be a bit overwhelming with, you know, having to design and build your own little car and things like that if you've never done it. So our race formats and the way that we break up our sessions is something that we've really sort of focused on to make sure that we've made this as inclusive as we possibly can, from no matter what kind of background or thing that you might be dealing with at that point in your life.
Incredible. And my older son is just in the youngest age bracket that you mentioned earlier. So, you know, after this, I'm definitely going to drop an annoying email to his head teacher to say, come on, sign up to Idaci. So you mentioned dreaming on the carpet, you know, like kind of with those toy cars. I also like, I don't know, it's got some chalk outside in the, you know, on the pavement or something, and made little bespoke tracks. You know, we're all dreaming. What are you dreaming of with Idaci, your startup? What are your goals? Where are you trying to get to, or what change are you trying to achieve in the real world?
I suppose the goal. So there is one big goal that I would like to achieve with Idaci, and that's I would like us to be the first, or one of the first at least, broadcast circuit racing championships in Africa. That's a big ambition of mine, because I genuinely believe that we have the championships in place and the structure there for us to be the first to really break that market that we've seen. You know, we've seen the likes of Formula One, and Lewis Hamilton has called for years. We'd love to see a race in Africa. Talks have happened with South Africa. We've had a Grand Prix in South Africa before. not in my lifetime, as far as I'm aware, anyway, unless I've just missed something. But that's a really big goal of the business moving forward for in the upcoming years, and something that we were actively engaging in early conversations to try and figure out how we would actually go about making that a reality. So far, the things have been quite promising, I have to say. In terms of my own personal goals as well, to be honest, I really get a kick out of just making people smile, as cheesy as that sounds. I just want this to be entertaining for people. I've kind of likened it to others as, I almost want it to be like the theme park experience. It's so, many people in their lives will get the chance to go to a theme park, and they are, in the grand scheme of things, I would say, generally quite accessible. And that's something that I've really modeled what I want our future fans, if you like, to really feel when they come to our race events. You're not just there to watch, you're there to actually get stuck in, and really, even if you weren't part of the STEM clubs, there's no reason why you can't have a go, with the championships that we've got, and the two that will sit hopefully either side of the current age brackets that we have as well. So that's my big ambition. I mean, one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? One of the most nicest moments in my career so far was when I was doing some STEM ambassador work, and I was running a project for some high school students at a local college here in Portsmouth, where I'm based. And I was doing it alongside the NHS during, it was kind of lockdown. We were starting to come out of it, but a lot of it was started online, and then we were able to come and do some sessions in person. But anyway, so we got to the end of that project, and the students had absolutely loved it. I couldn't, wish for a better group. All different backgrounds, all different experiences of STEM previously. And one of them came up to me and said that he'd applied for an apprenticeship at this company that he'd always wanted to work for. And he got it, and I said, "Oh, congratulations." And then he told me how he got it. And he basically, he said, this interviewer had a set of questions in front of him, and it was started by, sort of going through them sort of line by line. It was very rigid. And then he started to talk about the project that I'd created during lockdown for these students. He put the sheet of paper to one side, and for the next 45 minutes just grilled him on his role in that project. And when he told me that it was basically the thing that had allowed him to really sell himself, give him the confidence, and really go for that role in the first place, let alone nail the interview using what he'd learned in the project that I'd set up. That was one of the most satisfying moments, if not the most satisfying moment I've ever had in my career so far. And I think, to be honest, with this business, I just want to be able to give young people the chances that maybe I didn't necessarily have when I was younger as well. So yeah, my biggest goal is to be able to see what I've put out there is able to do that for, if it's just one young person, I'll be happy
Absolutely. And that is an extremely sort of moving story to know that, at least one person's sort of future has been positively influenced by you. And I'm sure it's many, many more. So if people are at home listening to this, can they support you in some way? Can they support Idaci? What's the best thing we can do to kind of help gain profile for your organization?
I would say, well, we're most active on Instagram. So if you search for Idaci Motorsport on Instagram, please give us a follow. It's definitely our most active social media account. Professionally, if you want to follow us, then LinkedIn is also another one that we use quite regularly at the moment. Those are our big two. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that most of the viewers can do, and just share it with your friends and your family as well with what we're doing. Recently we were at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Couldn't quite believe that we just, in the 30 years that the Goodwood Festival of Speed has been running, we managed to exhibit on the year when Saturday was completely ruined by strong winds, but never mind. But when we were at Goodwood, what was really incredible to see when we had one of our demo tracks there in our tent was not just the number of people that wanted to come and engage with what we were doing. It was how many people actually came back the next days. How many people when I spoke to them said, "Oh, are you here for the full 4 days or 3, as it turned out?" And they said yes. And you say, "Oh, come back tomorrow and we'll have something else for you to try." And you don't really expect people to come back. Generally, most people don't. But the vast majority, they did, and they brought their friends as well. So I feel like when we have been able to get this in front of people, they've really taken to it and the story and what we're trying to achieve. So if you share it with your friends and family just in conversation, tell them to look at our social media and our website. The one thing you will find on our website as well is an affiliate program. So that is essentially a program where if you bring in a customer for us, you'll get a percentage back of the revenue that's generated from that. So literally you can essentially earn a bit of money from a conversation. So get yourself signed up to that as well if that's something you think someone out there who would be interested in signing up for one of our championships. Definitely go and sign up for that, because you've really got nothing to lose with that one. But yeah, that's probably a couple of ways in which you could support us right now. Definitely.
That's fantastic. This is so, this is one of the best ideas I think I've ever heard, like partly on the kind of commercial side in terms of how many endorsements this is just waiting to receive, but also just from the educational and impact side. So best of luck. And in a bit, I'm really intrigued to hear a bit more about, your professional life in the sort of defense sector, and also what it's like to run a startup. But before we do that, we tend to break things up with a bit of a quick game.
Okay.
So I guess my question to you, because we can do this about drivers or we can do this about engineers, but it's called Taxi Dinner Avoid, and it's kind of a PG version of another game which you may have heard elsewhere. But basically, you've got to pick someone to drive you to dinner. You've got to pick someone in the taxi, that is. You've got to pick someone to have dinner with, and you've got to pick someone to avoid. Usually we say, Formula One drivers on the current grid. So you can either do that, or if you're sort of super clued up on the engineers in F1, you can do a special edition. But it's up to you. Which would you prefer to play?
I think for the sake of the listeners, let's go drivers.
Okay, right. Well, look, Taxi Dinner Avoid, F1 drivers. Who's going to take you to dinner? Who are you going to have dinner with? And who are you just going to avoid?
Okay. Oof. I want to think about the future of my business here. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, pick someone that is not consequential to the key places you want to go to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Ooh, this is tough. This is really tough. I would love to have dinner with, and I'm only going to say this actually, literally, I saw a video of him about an hour ago on my Instagram talking about like the risks associated with Formula One, and from the period that this guy was racing. I'd love to learn a lot more about that and some of the stories that he's got. So I would love to have dinner with Sterling Moss. I would love to be driven there by Lando, because I think the thing is, he's also, I think he's at Tomorrowland right now with Max Verstappen and Martin Garrix. So he'd bring the tunes in the car as well as be an amazing driver. So I'd certainly get to the dinner in style and probably with a few thrills as well and some good beats. And then what was the other one? Was the other one avoid? Who would I want to avoid?
Yeah, it's slightly more controversial. Usually people think they're going to duck it, and then they work out a way of answering it. So, over to you, really, up to you.
Who do I avoid? I don't know. Who would I avoid? My God, this is so hard. I would probably say, I honestly have no idea. I'm so struggling here. Probably because I didn't I'm being completely honest now, and I might get hate for this. I didn't particularly enjoy. I don't think I particularly enjoy a conversation with someone like Nikita Mazepin. If I was
There
to
you
put
go. I
on
mean,
it.
that's an acceptable answer. You kind of found the way. You found the way. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, maybe Nikita's an extremely nice guy. We just don't know.
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
knows?
he may well be. He may well be, but you can only go off what you see, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yes, absolutely. The less said about his social media posts, etc., the better.
yes, yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Well, look, you managed to demonstrate a great deal of diplomacy there, but also your sort of interest in Sterling Moss and the history and the safety of the sport. So let's go back to you and a bit about what it's like in your life at the moment, because I get the impression you're trying to, I say trying, you're succeeding in having a sort of quite a busy, or it looks like quite a successful day job for a major firm, but also running a startup. So, like, what's that like? What's life like for you at the moment?
Yeah, there's a lot of juggling of things, to say the least. My phone calendar and my work calendars are my best friend at the moment, just to make sure I everything. It's yeah, it is busy, for sure. But I don't think I'd have it any other way, really. I think everybody who's especially where I used to work as well before my current employer will probably know. Some of them would have described me as a workaholic. I have toned it back a little bit since then. But yeah, it is busy, but it's, you know, I think when you're doing something that you really care about, with, you know, the startup, and it's something, I mean, the idea kind of first popped into my head, I would say, just as I finished university, which would have been around the summer of 2020. It started to form in my head, really. And it's kind of just sort of been, it was parked for a few years whilst I sort of got things going with my career in defence, and I, you know, previously worked there before doing sort of in Portsmouth before doing internships for a very similar company to the one I work for now. So yeah, that was all kind of sort of progressing nicely and things, and then I guess that, yeah, there came a point where I just really sort of wanted to bring this idea to the forefront, and I thought, well, I can either do it now, or I could wait until maybe if my future kids have probably gone on to, you know, university or whatever, and they're not, you know, running around a future house and things like that, and I'll be quite a lot older, and maybe I'll have even forgotten the idea. So I thought now is the time to really go for it. But no, I'm enjoying both sides at the moment. I think it's certainly a challenge, but yeah, I feel quite supported from sort of both sides of it, really, which is quite nice.
No, absolutely. It does make a difference. I can hear the passion in your voice. So it must make it easier, sort of getting up that hour earlier or working that extra hour to deliver what you're doing. So I guess the like inverse question is, because if you're a busy guy, you said that your calendar is your best friend. What does downtime look like for you? How do you recharge, and how do you look after your sort of mental well-being?
So the calendar definitely includes pretty much every single Formula One race weekend. Uh, so there's always time put aside to watch at least one of the practice sessions, and then some qualifying, and normally a full race. Much to the dismay of my girlfriend, who tries to like motorsport Formula One with me, but maybe doesn't really enjoy it anywhere near as much as me. But yeah, to be honest, in terms of downtime, I'm you know, in the past, just over a year now, I've been together with my current partner, and she's been like fantastic for me, really, in terms of ensuring that I do focus a little bit more on myself, and making sure I, you know, will do some exercise, and just do some things with her as well. You know, it's probably the best distraction I could possibly have, if that's a way to put it. Yeah, I think in terms of things that I do for myself, I must admit I'm not perfect. There are times where I do really get absorbed in the work, and I do have to be told, generally by my girlfriend, but I'm working too much and I need to focus on some other things. And I certainly don't get that right. But I think for me, just putting in little reminders in my calendar, text this person, we're going to go to watch the new Mission Impossible film. Other films are available, but we're going to go do something like that, or I'm just going to sit and watch some nice TV or something like that, which I enjoy doing. And the only thing one thing I really actually love to do, which I don't really get the chance to do a lot, more so because of location more than anywhere else, is hiking. I love kind of decluttering my mind by just going somewhere remote and just walking for ages. Obviously, I've got the South Downs being in Portsmouth, like on my doorstep, but I went to university in Lancaster, and anyone who's maybe listening who's sort of from that area will know the Lake District is on your doorstep. And when I was at uni, I was in the hiking club in my third year, and it was probably one of the best, if not the most happiest year of my life, really, because I was part of that and just able to sort of escape pretty much every weekend. Or every other weekend, weather permitting, which is a thing, obviously, in the Lake District. But if I was to add anything else in terms of personal hobbies and bring something back, it would be that. But I feel like I'm okay at striking the balance between work and giving myself a bit of time.
No, well, absolutely. And, your 20s are for working yourself to the bone. If capitalism hasn't taught us that, what will? But there we are. No, that's an aside. Okay, well, it's incredibly inspiring and sort of energizing to hear what you're up to and how you make it all work. Let's tip back into kind of current events. And we're at in Formula One, we're at the midway point-ish in the season. We're certainly at the summer break. Usually, this is the point on our podcast when we'd ask guests for predictions for the season. Clearly, that is slightly too easy this year, I would say. Unless you want to bet against Max to be the champion, I don't know. I'll pause and give you that opportunity. I don't know.
As much as I would like someone else to win, no, I don't think it's going to be anybody else.
No, okay. And I'm sure, like for Max fans in our listener base, I'm sure there are one or two. It's not because you dislike Max, presumably, but more you want a bit of mixture in the winner's circle. You want some different winners.
Yeah, exactly. But not sort of Abu Dhabi 2021 scenario where grey area, but no, a natural sort of competition. Honestly, the battle from sort of Perez to, I don't know, sort of Lance Stroll and all those teams and drivers that sit within it in the championship at the moment would be a pretty amazing season. If it's more from a perspective of if Max wasn't racing in Formula One, then it would be pretty epic. I think at the moment, watching that season, just watching it ebb and flow, which we haven't. I think it was 2011 or 2012 when they had 8 different race winners in the first 9 or 10 races or something like that. It would be nice to get something like that again, which hopefully 2026 we might see something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, and I don't know, maybe I'm just getting long in the tooth, as we'd say here in the UK, but like the racing always gets closer towards the end of a regulation cycle, but Formula One will have already by that point made the decision to change the regs. And then when the regs come in, there's always usually a team that has the advantage. We go back to Brawn in 2009, and then obviously Mercedes in 2014, and now Red Bull. So, I mean, maybe 2026 is going to be our salvation in terms of competitiveness, but I would guess, at least we've got a better hope of things getting closer under the current regs. But who knows? We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, go.
So my question to you was going to be, so let's predict the future even further. Let's take it a year, go 2024. I'm not asking you to predict whether Max is still going to have that sort of second a lap sort of pace advantage you seem to have. But are there some drivers that you think, pick a driver that you think won't be on the grid next season from the current lineup? Here's a good one. And pick a driver that you think isn't currently on the grid, but, has a chance of appearing in 2024. It's a tricky one, but I'm sure you're up to ask.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. there's a driver, in my opinion, who I think could be most deserving of a spot in Formula One, and that for me would be Alex Palou, because I think you look at well, it was reported in a test session alongside Lando McLaren that he was within a couple of tenths of Lando when he got into the car, which is a pretty, good. It's a good benchmark, I would think. So I would be really, really kind of excited to see, instead of a driver going from Formula One to IndyCar, we see it come the other way for a change, and just see how they do. Yeah, that would be a driver I'd love to see on the grid. Who do I think will not?
And in a way, with Alex. So,
yeah.
Well, tell me, who do you think is going to have to make way for Alex Palou? I mean, presumably not one of the McLaren drivers, since they're both doing an exceptional job. So, who's going to drop out?
I don't. People would probably maybe expect me to say someone like Logan Sargent, but I don't think he will go. I think, yeah, he takes a bit of flack for his performances, but one, he is a rookie. Two, whenever you hear, and forgive me because I've forgotten the Williams boss now, James Vowles. Yes, I think.
Right, yeah.
Whenever he gives interviews, and I know they're not always going to tell 100% the truth, but whenever he gives interviews and he gets asked about Logan's performance, he does always speak quite highly. Even if he makes a mistake, he's like, well, and the other times when he hasn't made a mistake, he has been pretty much on the pace with Alex, or he's been within a tenth, and the difference you see is just over, obviously, a race distance, and things are quite tight in the midfield pack as well. So if you are slightly off, it's really going to show in terms of where you finish. So I don't feel like he's doing a particularly bad job, and I think he will get another shot at it next year. Although there are some good top talents in Formula 2 kind of sniffing around for maybe that seat. Who do I genuinely think might not be there? Bold call. I don't think Daniel Ricciardo will be on the grid next year. I think I can't see him doing well enough to convince them, the Red Bull bosses, both on the AlphaTauri side and within the actual Red Bull main team, that he should replace Sergio. Because I think although, Red Bull maybe would like someone closer in that second seat, at the end of the day, Perez is still, correct me if I'm wrong, he is second in the championship, I think, at the moment. So, I think he's doing enough of a job at the moment and can afford some occasional, blips in form to be the sort of number two driver and to not cause a disturbance in the force, if you like, at Red Bull. As a driver, I don't think will be there. I think Daniel Ricciardo, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to outperform Tsunoda enough to convince Red Bull that he should have the second seat at Red Bull. And I think with the talent that's sort of waiting around in Formula 2, AlphaTauri doesn't necessarily like to have lots of experienced drivers in its ranks for too long. So, I can kind of envisage it would be sort of, sorry, Ricciardo, you've got to go. And then maybe, depending on how the likes of Frederick Vesti does in the test that he's got coming up relatively soon with Mercedes, he might fill that slot. I know it's, Mercedes, Red Bull, there's all that to sort of work out. But we have seen, Nick De Vries, who was well within the sort of Mercedes framework, if you like, go and race at AlphaTauri. It didn't necessarily work out how everyone thought, but nothing's impossible. So that sadly, because I do kind of like Daniel Ricciardo, to be honest, but I just don't think there will really be a place for him to go, and I don't think he'd necessarily want to stay at AlphaTauri as well either for more than the rest of this year.
No, it's a good question. I think he's got a 12th and a 16th or 13th and 13th and a 16th Ricciardo this season so far, which isn't much different to Nick De Vries. And actually, I think long gone are the days when the AlphaTauri would get like a fourth or a seventh. The car that Gasly managed to drag up the field. So it is it's a tough car, and yeah, I don't want to write off Ricciardo. Actually, let's give him a few races, and let's see.
Yeah.
I agree with you on Logan Sargent. Actually, I think he's been in the wrong place at the wrong time every now and then. Like in maybe it was Saudi or something, one of the first races of the season. He was really unlucky not to kind of get out of Q3. He had like good laps, and then he might go over the white line and lose them, and then sort of have a few incidents here or there. But yeah, he definitely merits a second season. But Formula One, there's a podcast out there by our friends of the show, Ben Hunt, who's the Sun correspondent for Motorsport, and it's called Inside the Piranha Club for a reason, because clearly it's a cutthroat industry. So who knows? We'll see. And if Alex Palou can make the grid, it would be really fascinating to see how he does on the sort of European or the sort of global circuit as opposed to the US one. Let's see.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think he will be a bit of a surprise package next year if he's given the chance, Sargent.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If he's given a chance, that's kind of quite a big caveat these days. And De Vries for me merited at least the season to see if he could have an upturn. But there we are.
Agreed.
Yeah. So fantastic. We've done a bit of current events. As we're bringing the show to a close, we like to ask a couple of questions of our guests. I suppose the penultimate one really is whether you have kind of any messages you want to put out there. You seem like someone that wants to kind of bring equality to all from the perspective of motorsport and STEAM subjects and getting people to kind of grow. Is there a message you want to leave our listeners with in particular?
Yeah, I guess firstly, do something you love, or try and find the thing that makes you passionate in life. It would be the thing that I would say. It sounds like a very easy thing to say, but making little baby steps towards it is definitely better than nothing. Is something that I've learned for sure. There is no right time to start your passion, and the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, if you like, or gives you that extra little push to get out of bed in the morning. And I guess the other thing I would also say as well is social and economic mobility is, I would say, and this might just be my perspective, I don't know if it's shared, but I feel like it is within the topic of diversity and inclusion and equity, or equality, whichever one you want to pick. It can be quite often overlooked. There was a STEM report that was released by the Department for Education not so long ago. And this report, I won't go into the whole details of it, but essentially it was over 100 pages long. And I was looking in there expecting to see a decent sized chunk on social and economic mobility in the UK and some statistics and things. And when I opened the report, what I actually found was out of the whole 100+ page report, socioeconomic backgrounds as a topic covered half of one page, which was quite surprising, to be honest, because to me, to talk about all the other issues that we do within diversity and inclusion and equality, we really need to focus on also the things that affect pretty much every single one of us. Even if if you are fortunate to be economically wealthy, there's always improvements that you can make with regards to, social mobility, making people aware of opportunities, and at the complete opposite end of the spectrum too. If you've got a lot of connections around you, but you can't make it happen, the famous phrase is it's hard to be what you can't see. So I think the thing that I would like people to think about is, when you go back to work tomorrow or to school, to college, or whatever, whoever the listeners are, just think about think about when we're having discussions in the workplaces and so on about equality, diversity, and inclusion, how that socio-economic piece can actually fit into the conversation, because I think sometimes it can be quite overlooked, and really, for me, it's the basis in which you build everything else.
I couldn't agree more, and clearly, there's no diversity of thought on this call, unfortunately. But like socioeconomic diversity for me, it can be an uncomfortable topic for some, because if if we take everything sort of at face value and charitably, I think everybody does want a more diverse, inclusive, and equal society and workplace and so on. But actually, when you're in a workplace, for example, as I am, and I don't know if you are, but where actually the socioeconomic diversity is quite poor, it's quite low, and if you start talking about it, actually it can make people feel quite uncomfortable in a way that perhaps they are now, interestingly less comfortable to talk about gender diversity, even if it's a man that you're talking to, or
Yeah.
racial diversity, even if it's a white person you're talking to. So yeah, you're right. It's an interesting one to try and make sure is at the forefront. And credit to you for what you do.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So, on that profound note, we then ask a bit of a silly question. And the setup to that is, no, I usually say it's the most important question on the podcast, but do you like pizza? No one's ever said no, but I have to check these things.
I had a pizza yesterday, so yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. Right. We're on a good footing. We wouldn't have, this is a vetting thing where we wouldn't have let you on if you didn't like pizza. It's great. Okay. So the key question, it all comes down to this. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
That was a bold statement. Welcome to the club. I love it. Like Jorgy is very pro pineapple. Me, all the greats. Me, Mario Andretti, yourself. Anyone that's been on this podcast that said no pineapple, I'm here for you. So fantastic. And I'm sure you wouldn't stand in the way of other people should they, want to have pineapple, but just not for yourself.
No, absolutely. To be honest, the fact that I don't have pineapple means you can have more on yours. So,
Wow. See, that's a kind of entrepreneur. You just found a way to make it seem like an opportunity for someone else. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Good. All right. Where can people find you? You talked about Instagram for your business and LinkedIn. So Instagram, what is the handle?
At Idaci Motorsport is the handle.
Okay. Yeah. So Idaci, Idaci.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And a Motorsport. Brilliant. And Ryan Yates on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I do have a personal Instagram, but I don't really use it that much, to be honest.
Okay. All right. Well, who knows? Maybe you'll have an uptick when, I can imagine you at the Kyle Army Grand Prix doing a co-promote with the new Grand Prix and your first steps into the African continent. So fingers crossed you realize that vision.
Thank you. No, thanks very much, and thanks for having me as well. This is actually my first podcast, so I'm delighted to have been
the first of many. Remember us, when you're sort of swanning around in a very inclusive way on the grid. We want to, recall our time together. It's been a real pleasure, Ryan, and we all wish you the best. I'm sure the listeners would join me in saying that.
No, thank you very much, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm just making a note that I'm going to give you a shout out when I become famous. So
brilliant. Okay, well, I'm sure it's a long list, but I trust you as someone that is fastidious in your planning that you will shout us out. So, thank you everyone for joining us this week. Before you go, if you've made it an hour deep in the podcast, please, it's free of charge. Just give us a like if you're listening to us watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on your sort of podcast platform of choice, comment, make sure you're sort of following us or subscribe to us, and give us feedback on Twitter. We're at Strip the Dip. We're also on Instagram. I'll admit Jorgy does that. Instagram, I've never really gotten to that level. So I'm a basic Twitter guy at Strip the Dip. So without further ado, until next time, this has been your unusual co-host, F1 Blag. See you soon. Goodbye.